Everyone, it's TJ, the Stereo-Bargainphile, and I am fired up today, you all. By popular demand, I'm going to be having my full video review and comparison of one of my favorite vintage amplifiers that had that old school analog sound to it, my Marantz 2270, which is basically a Class AB amplifier that weighs about 38 pounds. Now, when this amplifier came out in 1972, it had a retail price point of $550 US, which means with, inflation up to 2022, today that would be around $3,500 US. So yes, this is what I would consider to be an entry-level amplifier. Now, it does weigh 38 pounds, it's Class AB, and it has 70 watts of vintage power. Don't let that 70 watts fool you all, because again, you all, the 2270 is a little monster, and it has very good torque power overall. But before I get into that comparison for y'all and start talking about what you all should expect of the Marantz 2270 to sound like, let's quickly have a close-up look. But I tell you all, I am a sucker for that old school analog Marantz sound, which some people would call that vintage Marantz house sound. And there's a big following behind this amplifier, so let's get into it right now. Okay, here we go with a close-up look of my Marantz 2270 from 1972. They actually made this amplifier to 1976. And one of the first things you will notice is that iconic blue lights on the front. And then we actually have an aluminum faceplate. So let me give it a close-up look. Now this is kind of hard to get on camera, but I will get it for y'all. At the very top, you see we have our signal strength for our FM tuning and AM tuning. Then we have our multipath, high blend, monitor buttons. Then below we have a selector knob, which you can hear the quality of the potentiometers. We'll go to the bass knob. Nothing but quality, y'all. Then we have mid-range. Top we got mono, low filter, high filter, and you can really tune this amplifier in to how you want your speakers to sound. Then over here we have the balance, volume, but you see that loudness button? I had the volume on about 3 or 11 o'clock on the volume dial. I pushed the loudness button in, you all, and yes, it about blew the Kef Q 350's mid-range driver out of the box. So be careful when hitting that loudness button, because the 2270 is a little monster receiver from 1972. So now, let's go to the back. Okay, now we're at the back of the Marantz 2270. You can see over here in the far left-hand corner, we have our main speaker inputs. Then you have remote speaker inputs. But basically, that's A and B speakers. Then down below, you see something we don't hardly never see no more on amplifiers, and that's actually a power supply that you can use up to 200 watts max on one side and 100 watts max on the other side. Now you can see that little red sticker there. That just means it's been serviced at a local repair shop. Let's get this in good for you all. Here you go. Made in Japan, and I think it draws 500 watts altogether. We go down, here's your fuse and your quad radio. And then we have our main in and pre-out. Yes, you can use this as a preamp or a dedicated amplifier. And I actually have the original jumpers. And then here's your record 2-in-1. If you had a tape deck, another tape record, play 1 and 2, auxiliary, which I used mostly. And then you have your phono 1 and 2. Then you have an antenna you can plug up above it, but you have a built-in antenna up here that you can push in and out. Then we have a level above that for the muting level. Really good looking amplifier. So now let's get into this, y'all. Before I jump straight into the overall sound performance and tonal character of the Marantz 2270, and also I'm going to have a comparison for you all against my new age Marantz, the PM 8006. But before I get in that, there's two things very quickly I need to go over with you all. First off is price point. Now, as I was saying at the first of the video, the Marantz 2270, back in the early 70s, it was around $550 US. Meaning today, with inflation, it would be about a $3,000 to $3,500 little monster receiver. Whereas my Marantz PM 8006, you can buy it today, brand new, for $1,500 US. So there's going to be some people out there say, TJ, well, that really wasn't a fair comparison between them. And I get what they're saying. I get it 100%. Maybe if I had a Marantz Ruby, integrated amplifier, it's like $4,000 US to compare against it. Yes, that would probably be a little bit better of a fair comparison overall when it only comes to that sense of scale and weight to the overall sound. But hey, check this out, you all. Today, I'm comparing them because dollar for dollar, I can buy both of these amplifiers around $1,500 US. Of course, I can buy the Marantz PM 8006 very easy. But if you go on eBay, you will see people selling a Marantz 2270. And in my opinion, if it's in very great condition and it's been serviced all through the years like mine, in my opinion, they're worth about $1,500 US. Now, I have seen some people, kick the price up all the way to $2,500, $2,600 US. But most of the time, those amplifiers have been completely restored. Now, the second thing I want to go over with you all very quickly is during this video, at 4 minutes and 25 seconds of this video that I was making today, I kept having my phone going off. I actually put my Marantz 2270 up for sale the night before last, and I've had so many people hit me up on it. Actually, a guy drove 4 hours, going both ways to buy the amplifier from me. So I was like, man, I'm halfway in my video, but I'll go ahead and bring you the amplifier. So yes, I did sell my Marantz 2270, and I actually took a picture of it and blew it up so we could have some kind of comparisons. But a lot of subscribers know that I've been posting pictures of my Marantz 2270 for over a year now. But anyways, no one monkey, don't stop, no show. So let's go ahead and get straight into the comparison for you all, because I think this can give you a better idea overall of the total sound performance and tonal character of the Marantz 2270. So enough of me talking, and again, I'm not going to fluff this up, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's just going to be straight up and simple. Yes, I'm going to be speaking English to you all today. But anyways, let's get straight into it. First off, the Marantz 2270, again you all, this is a 37-pound 2-channel little monster receiver. Basically, overall, I would call this classic vintage amplifier of having, that old school analog sound to it that has very good tonality. Now, over here to y'all's left, my Marantz PM 8006 that I reviewed a couple months ago on video. I'll put the link down in the description box. But anyways, to me, the Marantz is that new era, that new sound of Marantz, that to me overall sounds just a little bit more analytical than it does musical. Now, there isn't one that's better than the other. They both just have a completely different sound to them. So let's go over that now very quickly with y'all. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about with y'all is that full flesh and body and scale to the overall sound. That overall heft. Because here's where I see a little bit of the bigger differences overall. Yes, the 2270 sounds a little bit heavier overall than the PM 8006, but that is a given, you all. It's a bigger amplifier. But I'm not taking nothing away from the Marantz PM 8006, because one thing that Marantz, good grief, did include with this amplifier was a 625 VA toroidal transformer that's double shielded. So I just want you to know that the PM 8006 isn't too far in behind the 2270 in that terms of scale and weight and flesh and body to the overall sound. I would even tell you that the Marantz PM 8006 is about 85 to 90% of the Marantz 2270. So now let's jump straight into the bass, the overall bass performance, of the 2270 versus the PM 8006. with a Marantz 2270, you all, when it comes to bass, the 2270 is very powerful, y'all. You know, it's full, has that big round bass to it overall. I mean, even mid bass, if you have the speakers that are capable of it, bass that will actually, you know, have enough, you know, juice in it to punch you right in the chest, or maybe even in the gut. But anyways, the bass that I get from the PM8006, you know, it's more of what I would call faster bass, a little bit tighter bass, you know, bass that has just a little bit more grip to it overall versus the Marantz. Yes, the Marantz sounds bigger, more rounder, more impact, but you know, to me, the Marantz PM8006 is kind of, you know, quick on its feet. You know, all together, you know, it would be like comparing a light heavyweight with the PM8006 against a heavyweight with the Marantz 2270. Now let's talk about the mid-range. First off, both of these amplifiers are on the warm side of neutral. Now I will say the Marantz 2270 is what I would call really warm, where I'd call the PM8006 just a little warm. But when it comes to the mid-range of the 2270, one thing I will tell you all is that the 2270 overall has this lush and smooth and rich kind of sounding mid-range to it overall. And the mid-range of the 2270 does have more of a thickness to it than the Marantz PM8006. Now when it comes to the mid-range of the PM8006, the mid-range with the Marantz PM8006, like I was talking with my initial video review of the 8006, I was saying it had that V-shaped sound curve to it. I mean, it's got boosted bass and boosted treble. And the mid-range is just pulled back just a little bit. Not too recessed, but it's pulled back a little bit. But in regards of the mid-range with the PM8006, it does sound a little bit thinner sounding than the 2270. Now that's not a bad thing, because the mid-range of the PM8006, in my opinion, you know, it's just a little bit warm, but it sounds really clean and accurate to me overall. So now let's jump straight into the top end sound of the Marantz PM8006 versus the 2270. Now here's the one thing I love about the 2270, you all, is that the top end, in my opinion, it is a little bit mellow sounding, a little bit softer sounding in the top end than the Marantz PM8006. So basically what I'm saying is the 2270, you know, having that old school kind of analog sound, it doesn't sound artificial to me. But I will tell you, the top end or the upper treble frequencies, it isn't the most refined sounding. But you know, you can always use tone controls. It's really going to depend on the speakers. But in comparison to the PM8006 top end, well, the top end of the PM8006, I've got to tell you all, it is very energetic with lots of sparkle. Yes, the top end of the PM8006 is boosted up a little bit, but it does sparkle very well. Now, yes, if you use the PM8006 on a very bright sounding speaker, it can be a bad day. You can go back and watch my initial review of the PM8006, because this is about the 2270. So now let's talk about the overall instrument separation. And I'm going to make this easy comparing the PM8006 against the 2270. When it comes to instrument separation, let's say we're listening to an orchestra, okay, and say there's 10 instruments playing all at the same time. Now, on average, with the Marantz PM8006, you know, I may hear, you know, 7 or 8 of them instruments playing at a time. Whereas with the Marantz 2270, when I'm sitting back listening to an orchestra that has 10 different instruments playing, I may only hear 6 or 7 of those instruments playing at a time. So yes, when it comes to instrument separation, you know, the new age Marantz PM8006 does a very good job. But when we start talking about dynamics and that initial attack, you know, that first strike of a drum and how those peaks of the dynamics of the music are playing out, when I compared them both against each other, yes, of course, this is where the Marantz 2270, in my opinion, has the advantage. So now let's talk about the sound stage, you all, because that is very important also. The Marantz 2270, it does have a good sound stage, and one of its strong points with the sound stage is it has very good depth to the overall sound. But compared to the Marantz PM8006, like I said in my video review, this sucker is an imaging monster, you all. I do not know what it is about the Marantz PM8006, but height, width, depth, the PM8006 just does an amazing job overall. I mean, very center imaging, localizations of the instruments and the artist. This is where I got to give the W to the New Age PM8006. And then let's start talking about clarity and detail refinement. 2270, when it comes to clarity and detail refinement, yes, it does a good job. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that 2270 has that hyper detail to it, because that's not what the Marantz 2270 is about. And one thing that I do love about it is it doesn't sound artificial to me. It's just really easy to listen to overall. But again, when it comes to clarity and detail refinement, I got to give the W to the Marantz PM8006. It does have that, what I would call analytical sound to it, just meaning that the clarity and detail refinement sound very accurate to me. That PM8006 does a very good job in that regard. And no, it doesn't sound too artificial to me overall. And then let's talk about tonality real quick to wrap this up. Now, I used many different speakers comparing the two amplifiers against each other. Again, I will list those for you all down in the description box. But when it comes to tonality, y'all, one thing that I loved about the 2270 was that it would, when I was sitting there listening to a pianist, and they would go hit that piano note, or they would hit the keys on a piano, when I heard that note going out through the room, it actually had more density, more of that correct volume to it overall than a Marantz PM8006. But the thing that I loved about the PM8006 was that when the pianist, would strike the keys, that actual decay that would ring out into the room was drawn out a little bit further than the 2270. So it's basically like the 2270 had just a little bit more density and weight to those notes, where the PM8006 just had a little bit better, it does sound a little bit thinner, but it's not lean. It's not a lean sounding amp, but it would carry it out, that decay out in through the room. The sound stage is friggin' awesome on this Marantz PM8006. And again, the Marantz 2270, it does have more of a forgiving sound to it. Meaning, if you're somebody that plays not so good recordings, yes, the 2270 is going to do a better job of covering that up. But that pretty much wraps it up for me, you all. Like I said, I wasn't going to spice it up. I wasn't going to fluff anything up or sugarcoat it. I was just going to be straight up with you all. And both of these Marantz amplifiers sound completely different than one another. I mean, over here you have that old school analog sound that to me is very mature sounding. It's rich, lush, warm. It's got that good scale of weight to the sound overall. And then over here we had the Marantz New Age amplifier that, in my opinion, it's a little articulate, meaning it has outstanding clarity, very good sound stage. It's warm also. It has a V-shaped sound character, boosted bass, boosted treble, which I actually like with this amplifier, believe it or not. I will say the 2270 is more balanced sounding, of course, but there's nothing wrong with that V-shaped sound signature. I actually like it myself, overall. But yes, the PM8006, it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit leaner, and a little bit faster on its feet, so to speak. It's more what I call an articulate sounding amplifier, where the 2270 is more of a musical sounding kind of amplifier overall. But I will say I've had so much fun comparing these two Marantz amplifiers against each other. I mean, you all, they sound totally different than one another. But one of the most impressive things for me personally with the classic Marantz was the actual vocals, you all. Again, I rode through many different speakers, and when I was sitting back listening to the vocals through this classic Marantz, the 2270 just had more emotion overall that I could hear in the singer's voice over the Marantz PM 8006. And the 2270 done a really good job of keeping away from having any kind of sibilant sound that you would get from those high female pitches, or even one of my go-to guys, Michael Bublé. Now, Michael Bublé, in some of his songs, he can sound what I call a little sassy S kind of sound, sounding kind of sibilant, real S-y. But the Marantz 2270 done a very good job of holding that together. Even the vocals didn't sound too shallow. It's up in front, and it just got the overall tonality of vocals I liked much better with the 2270 than I did the Marantz PM 8006. But I'm not saying the vocals are bad out of the Marantz PM 8006. For its price point, it does a great job. And again, I know this is going to depend on what kind of speakers you are using to pair up with either one of these amplifiers. But again, you all, I have said it since day one, an amplifier highly influences the overall sound performance that you are going to get out of your speakers. So now, to wrap this video up real quick, I'm going to talk about some of the caveats with the classic Marantz, and then I'm going to talk about speaker pairing. So I'm going to take a real quick break right now and be back in 1 second for you all. Hey everyone, before I get into the caveats of this classic Marantz amplifier, I first want to remind you all that this amplifier is 50 years old, and it still performs like a beast, you all. There's no problems wrong with it all. Yes, it's been serviced through the years, but back in the 1970s, Marantz really paid a lot of attention to detail when building these receivers. They used a lot of high-end components, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, the amplifier is still going strong. But like I said at the first of the video, that did cost you a little bit of money. And one thing that I was guilty of, like 10 years ago, because I've been a vintage enthusiast since 1990. And about 10 years ago, I would tell people all the time, I would say, you could not buy amplifiers today that were built like they was back in the 70s, back during what I call the golden age of audio. And y'all, I couldn't be more wrong in saying that. I mean, even today, I own new age solid state amplifiers that is built just as well as the 2270. But if you go out today and you buy a brand new Class AB amplifier, built somewhere close to the standard that the classic Marantz was built to, yes, you're going to pay north of $4,000 US. The good thing about, vintage amplifiers like this is that we can go buy them for like half that price. Or you may even get lucky and buy it for a third of that price. But anyways, I just wanted to get that out there and tell people, yes, they build them just as good today. And yes, they even have amplifiers, if you have a whole lot of money, that is even built better today. Because one of the #1 technologies that has advanced more than anything else is the transistor. That's right, you all. It is the transistor. Go look it up. But anyways, let's talk about some caveats with the classic Marantz. First off, 1972, we did not have a wireless remote control. So if I wanted to adjust the tone controls or the volume up and down, I had to get up out of my listen seat and walk over to the amplifier. Now I know some people out there say, well, you can just set the amplifier right next to you and make all the adjustments. I'm not doing all that crazy business. The second caveat with this amplifier is, for some people, wasn't for me, but for some people, this amplifier isn't what I would call a hyper-detailed amplifier. Not matter what kind of speakers you hook up to it. If you're the kind of person in the recording, you want to hear if somebody drops a needle, and when that needle hits the floor, you want to hear it, then yes, the Marantz 2270 is probably not going to be for you. It has that old school analog sound that's very warm, and it has a little bit of that lush and rich and forgiving sound to it overall. Now, when it comes to speaker pairing with the Marantz 2270, you all, there's so many tone controls and filters on this amplifier that you can tune just about any speaker in to sound good. And I had a lot of fun actually doing this. But, you know, over 50% of the time, I did leave all the tone controls on 0, and I left all the filters completely off, because I just wanted to hear the purest form I could out of the amplifier. And one of my favorite speaker pairings was my JBL Studio 580s. I mean, I had that set up in my living room, and that overall sound was very powerful, and it was very detailed and very dynamic. But anyways, my second favorite speakers, of course, the Triangle Esprit Easy Comets. They sounded really good with the amplifier. And also from 1976, my Pioneer HPM 100s. That was a very powerful sound also. I mean density. I mean, I had the system hooked up in my bedroom, and once I turned the sound up to like, let's say 11 o'clock on the volume dial, it was like I was pressurizing my bedroom. Those old HPM 100s are pretty badass. But anyways, the only kind of speakers I wouldn't recommend to pair up with the 2270s is no other than speakers that have a very robust and warm sound. When I hooked up my Polk Audio lsim 703s, it really didn't pair up good at all with this amplifier. But anyways, you all, that pretty much wraps it up for me today. And the only thing I have to say left is that I really wish you all that Marantz Audio would bring back that old school analog sound. I really think there's a market out there for it. I think a lot of people would buy it. What do you all think? Let me know down in the comment sections. And until next time, this is TJ, the Stereo-Bargainphile. And that, my friends, is a wrap.